Hey everybody, back again today with a different one. Rather than the prowl that I was going to do, that I listed I was going to do yesterday, I decided to do something else because just wanted to shake things up a little bit and mix it up. So we're going to be doing Mightor from the '60s cartoon from Hanna-Barbera, and I just wanted to go a different route today and bring in a little something different, get back to the action hero stuff, and just shake it up. Um, I grew up watching these cartoons in syndication, like most of us did, especially the '80s kids, '70s and '80s kids. They were in syndication. We got to see all the old cool stuff. This was the predecessor cartoon series um, to, or studio, rather than leading into what we knew as the '80s cartoons and Marvel uh, cartoons in the '90s. And DC was out there for a while. Marvel was out there for a while through Hanna-Barbera as well. They licensed out to Hanna-Barbera to do the Fantastic Four, Submariner, Thor, Spider-Man, a couple of others. Um, they licensed out those properties as well. But for the most part, Hanna-Barbera had just as many superheroes as they had in their lineup as they did the comedy stuff. I mean, everybody knows like Top Cat and all those characters, and uh, Yogi Bear, and Yogi and Boo Boo and all that, and the Wacky Racers and all that mess. And they don't really know a lot of these old hero characters. Um, there are a lot of these guys in their gallery, and I tell you, it's just crazy how they're coming back. DC Comics and IDW got those licenses worked out. DC got the licensing, and then passed them on to IDW to do the studio work, and IDW took it over completely because DC just didn't have the interest. And then they crossed over into all that, where all those new books came out. You had the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and all that come out from the Hanna-Barbera line through IDW and a couple of other books, publishing houses, excuse me. And then you had the stuff come out where DC redid Johnny Quest and a couple of other things, and they did the future whatever it was series, where they did a mix mash and hodgepodge of the stuff. And it's basically what they did with the Mattel line from the Transformers and He-Man and all that when they rebooted everything. And it was really cool to see all those come back out. But I've always been partial to this particular string of heroes, because there was just to name a few, not to name them all, but to name a few: Mightor, the Herculoids, the Galaxy Trio, Space Ghost, and specifically for me, Birdman was always a personal favorite. I know everybody thought that was cheesy because he used to yell out his name, and whatnot, but that was just a personal favorite for me, probably because it drove my my mom and my aunt crazy when my cousin and I would watch it. But anyway, yeah, that was one of those things where it's a nostalgic period. For me as a kid, when I was little, I used to watch these in syndication, like I said, and they would play all day on the old Cartoon Network. When it originally started, that's what they had, and then they went and shifted it all over, the classic stuff all over to Boomerang, so that they could keep that licensing going. And it was primarily the Cartoon Network and Hanna-Barbera, the corporation, maintaining their licenses by producing the shows, so that they didn't have to sell them off for property renewals. But that was just something that was really, really cool. And kids in modern day that just don't have the same cartoon leverage that we used to have when we were younger, and that's something that I was always wanting to do with my comics is to bring that back and reinstill what cartoons of mature storyline and quality really have. And with the other day of the Tiger Shark, blah, tongue twister, the Tiger Shark issue, where, like I said, I watched it and it didn't play out quite as well as I remember it. These cartoons, however, still hold up, and I was just like, I got to shake it back up and get that back off, because it did a number on me for some reason. It just changed. It changed me doing these cards. I was just like, well, I lost the mojo, I guess, out of it, and it was just one of those things where I needed to rekindle it. So I'm back to basics, and I figured I'd shake things up a little bit with bringing some of the cards back that really are close and dear to me as a comic creator and really influenced what I do, especially as an artist. And this is one of those things that is timeless, because Mightor even holds up till today. So does Space Ghost, as you've seen, numerous renditions of Space Ghost come out as a comedy from Cartoon Network parody stuff, versus the new cartoon series that's coming up, I believe. I don't know if it's coming out directly to DVD or if it's a rehash or recollection of the original, but I know there's a new DVD set coming up of Space Ghost pretty quick, and I'm very pleased about that, because whether it's the original 60s cartoons or if it's the later 80s reboot, I tell you, it was phenomenal either way. I loved both of those series because they used the original style, and I'm not sure if they're going to reboot it or not as an upstart property for Hanna-Barbera Heroes. I know they just rebooted Scooby-Doo yet again. They're talking about it in 2018, a new Scooby-Doo coming out, so that's going to be interesting to see that come back. I don't know how they're going to play it this go around, but it'll be hit or miss. Who knows? But this guy, man, he is basically the primitive predecessor to He-Man, as it were. That's what I always like to call him, because of the fact that the way He-Man would haul off he was Prince Adam, and he would haul off the magic sword and say, the phrase in front of Grayskull, and then become He-Man and whatnot, and morph Cringer into Battle Cat. Well, this one has a similar feel to it, and Hanna-Barbera did it first with Mightor. He would hold off a magic club and say a magic phrase and become Mightor, and he had a dragon / dinosaur type of critter that would be with him, and he would zap him with a bolt off the end of the club, and it would turn him into a giant flying fire-breathing dragon. And it was just phenomenal to watch. A lot of people get turned off by that stuff. They think the magic and myth and fantasy stuff is cheesy, but it still holds up till today. And like I said, if I was to follow a comic book, I was going to follow this comic book with DC and IDW, but they never spun it off into its own title. They always kept it in as a part, and they kind of mixed them all together into a hodgepodge where the universe crossed over, and then never did anything with it, because the universe never took off as far as their storylines went. So I lost interest real quick. The book was called Future Quest, I believe it was. I'm not going to stop drawing to actually look at that, but I believe that's what it was called, Future Quest. And Johnny Quest was at the prime of it, and that was just one of those things. I got really excited about that when that book came out, and like I said, I've read an issue or two of it, and that was the end of it. And like I said, it's just not one of those things where I pick up a lot of regular ongoing monthly titles now, because of the fact that the modern stuff just doesn't appeal to me the same way since they've done all the swapping and stuff. But to each their own. I mean, if it's a good series, I'm glad you guys get something out of it, and at least the characters are still kicking in some form or other. So I'm not going to knock that. I've never been one to knock that, but it just doesn't resonate with me enough to purchase and stay in the collector market for that. So that's why I tend not to. But anyway, I'm gonna knock this out. And the funny thing is, this guy, he's got huge pecs, but no nurples. 1960s editing. So there you go. No nurples. So that's the way he's got it going. But yep. And he wears this stone charm, which I found was cool too. He doesn't get any power from it or anything like that. Matter of fact, coming back to Hanna-Barbera, they had a Hercules character, a Hercules style cartoon as well, and I always found that was fascinating too. They had a great series for Hercules, and I dig all that stuff because they took it very seriously, like the '80s cartoons for like the Thundercats, Filmation, and those studios. They took this stuff very seriously and took it to heart, and that's part of what made it so good, is because it wasn't just camp, and it wasn't cheesy, because kids that would watch cartoons then, adults were watching cartoons back in the 60s, because some of these things came on in primetime evening shows. I mean, it wasn't just Saturday mornings. They had these things on in the evening during regular shows. They had the Hanna-Barbera, what was it, the Moby Dick and Mightor hour, I think it was, is where this guy premiered. And that was an evening show. That wasn't even a morning show. It wasn't like Saturday morning cartoons. It was literally in the evening, like watching primetime. And that was crazy. And I remember reading articles about it where reporters, were saying that it was awkward that they wanted to put primetime animation together. But, hey, whatever, man. I mean, Hanna-Barbera was crazy. They were trying to compete against Disney back then because they had, the Disney Family Hour or the Family Movie Night, that Walt Disney started in the late 60s. I mean, he had that show going on way back when. And he would show whatever they wanted to, and they would show shorts during those shows as intermissions so that people could go to, get popcorn or whatever. And then they would show their animated movies as well in some of those shows. And whatever Walt wanted to play is what they played. And, he owned the studio at the time, so it didn't really matter because he bought that airtime completely from scratch. And they, any show that was on the air it wasn't a commercial purchase. They actually had to buy airspace. And that's part of what happened. They had to produce their own shows. And they had a time slot they had to maintain the watcher and viewership for to keep the time slot. So you go figure what happened, with Hanna-Barbera when they got involved. I just found that really fascinating that they would go that far. But they did. So, and competing against awkward things too. Mainstream television and whatnot, and then just other stuff, other shows of the like. It was just crazy what they would do. But that was the prime infancy of television. The 60s is where television really got its boom. It was a commonplace. Everybody could afford a television at that time, and that's where they become commonplace to have one in every home. And that was the big deal to see that happen. But anyway, these cartoons ran for a good 10-15 years, right into the early 70s. And they eventually, bottomed out and whatnot. And everybody wanted to cross over into small studio live action for a while. So, the Spider-Man TV show came out and things like that. And they stopped producing a lot of the cartoons, and DC took over the main Saturday morning cartoon stuff, and Hanna-Barbera had to compete with them with Scooby-Doo and things like that, and whatnot. So they had to change their approach. But a lot of the superhero stuff fell out of favor for a while, and it does cycle. the 70s and 80s were huge for superheroes, and the 90s were a reboot because the comics evolved and whatnot with digital coloring and image and all that mess. And then you had the sideline come back in 2000s where everything bottomed out a little bit because everybody was multi-cover this and multi-cover that and color this and throw out this big expensive issue and this big expensive issue and crossovers and amalgam and blah and all that mess going on. And then you had the market burst to where kids today are back to minimalist type kids being millennials are back to a minimalist mindset, and they want to it's like the 80s yuppies. They're back to that phase where they want to have as minimal space, minimal existence, and they're back to wanting to be as green as possible, with the ecologically sound kids, which are the modern versions of the hippies, which I'm totally cool with being green. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the lifestyle choices of a lot of the kids that read comics are totally different now in comparison because they would rather have electronic versions and use the power rather than use the storage space, and they want to save trees. So I'm all right with e-comics. I do e-comics all the time, but it's just just conversation. But it's one of those things where we've got a big comic bubble coming back up. The market's about to get another bubble, and here in the next couple of years, everybody's screaming right now because Marvel and Disney are talking about falling off the face of the earth. But the thing is, they're facing forcing change. Okay, that's the problem. They're facing forcing change, and they have to adapt and evolve and become the next evolution of their own company to make everything play out the way it needs to. So think about that when you think about the loss, when they start squawking, we're going to die. They're not. And if they do, it's their own fault. What you're seeing is them having to deal with an ever-changing market and step in and say, okay, we've got to step up and do this now, because if we don't, we're going to end up being left behind, and the indies are going to be all over the place with these e-comics and digital downloads and PDFs and all that. And, we got to get rid of our hype and stop pushing the market with all these 50,000 different stories that aren't flying, and stop throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, but actually start producing comic books again that people want to buy and read and that sell. Lord forbid. So, that's where we're at. And I love to look at that stuff because everybody freaks out about it. And it's just like, the comics are dead. No, they're not. Just a direct sale market for 50,000 different publishing, stickers, as they were. They got to stop throwing them at the wall and stop seeing what sticks and start kicking out comic books that we want to read and get back to basics with their stuff and pick a version that sells and get back to it and start making money with it. I will give Marvel credit. They did something, even though they Disneyized the crap out of my freaking childhood, which is part of the problem. They took every major character and Disneyized them into their own property version, but that's what Disney does. They make their own version of stuff to merchandise and sell, and that's what they do. So I can't knock that, but the thing is that at least with their comic books, if you want to know where you're going with the comics and what's going to happen, follow the films. Don't follow the comics, follow the films, because that's where Disney's control is, and that's where Marvel is going to be telling us what's coming in the films and in the comics. I've said that since 2005, since Iron Man got put into production, and when it came out in 2008, I was like, I'm right. But it is what it is. So, and it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. You want to watch what's going to happen with Marvel, watch what they do in the animation, watch what they do in the film, and watch what they do in the properties there, because comics they're the filler merchandise on the back end. They are second level or third level or even fourth tier in some cases for Marvel's property lines. They are not going to be the Marvel that we knew and loved. It is dead and gone. And if you think it's not, you're sorely mistaken. Okay, because it's never coming back the same way it was, unless DC decides to sell it, or unless Disney decides to sell it off somewhere and do something else with it. It's not going to happen. It's just not. Um, it is what it is, and we have to accept that. But you got to understand the positive. Um, the positive side to that is the fact that, on the same token, with DC and Disney doing themselves the way they did, guess what else it opens for us? As indie creators, it opens us wide open for the market to get everything in here and say, okay, now we can make room for decent books. And people like, the owners of Diamond and whatnot in these other industries are going to have to pay attention, because now with DC going digital and Disney shutting down, it's going to be a whole new world, because they're going to have to keep thriving to keep those stores stocked up with comic books. So guess who they're going to have to pay attention to now in the industry to make that happen? Everybody's scared of that, but not me. I'm like, okay, cool, bring it, because I know what's going to happen. And what it's going to do is it's going to open up the market to where the retailers are going to have to pay attention. The retail outlets, if they want to keep direct market, they're going to have to pay attention to us, and they're going to have comic books come in to fill those holes. Otherwise, they're not going to get anything going, and their shelves aren't going to be stocked. So to think the direct market's dead is foolish, because of the fact that it's going to jump up tenfold, because it's going to open up the independent market, and they're going to have to pay attention to us instead of treating us like crap. Where they could afford to reject us before, they can't do that now, because they don't have the leverage anymore, and they don't have the control. So this is the perfect opportunity for another distributor to come back up and say, okay, now, we're going to work with the retailers, and we're going to give the profit back to the publishers where it needs to be. So don't be worried about this. Just embrace the ride and go for it, and produce your comic books and make it happen. That's what I say do. But it all started back in the day with these guys. Hanna-Barbera was to animation what Disney was to movies, and what Marvel was to comic books. It's just they were the top dog, and that's exactly where they're staying till this day. Because there's nothing like them since, and there won't be anything like them after, unless someone else steps up and just takes over the reign and totally dominates and crushes what they did. Filmation got close to revamping what they originally did, but they didn't quite make the cut. Even though, like I said, Thundercats and He-Man and things like that are classic, but these characters came before and will last long after, if Hanna-Barbera has anything to say about it. So we'll see what happens. I think there's going to be a huge rekindling of these great characters later on in the next 10 years or so. I just think they are. I think they're going to take back off. We'll have to see what happens. But like I said, my gut feeling is that they're going to take back off. And once people understand that they're out there and what they are, they're going to be looking for superheroes here in the next 5 or 10 years that are going to be different and going to be true to the good and evil factor, rather than the stuff that Marvel and DC keep kicking out, which is, choking the chicken of drama this, drama that, evolution this, evolution that. They keep playing the society PR cards instead of taking on real heroes and villains storylines. And that's part of why shows like The Walking Dead are doing so well from Image and those type of studios are coming out. That's the reason the Daredevil series is such a big hit from Disney, because of the fact that they're playing off of the classic whole image of good versus evil, instead of playing these jokes of like they're doing with their comics and their properties, because of the fact that they're going back to good and evil, and they don't understand why that works just yet, but they're going to make it work. And once they realize what's going to happen, I think our comic books are going to change weight and direction back to that too, and I'm hoping so, because they need to do something, because they're killing it. They're killing the market, and they're shooting themselves in the foot, and they're doing it all on their onesie. But anyway, this dude is Mightor, aka the mighty Mightor, and it is one of my all-time favorite cartoon characters, and should be a comic book, but isn't yet. Should be a standalone comic book, I'll put it that way. Excuse me, crunching on my throat lodgings. But he should be a standalone comic book, all his onesie, and should be crushing it, and is not yet, sadly. Look at me going all Mark Silvestri over here, putting in all these lines and stuff. Stop it, you're overworking it, man. So, anyway, all joking aside, you guys, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for hanging and listening to me jabber and hanging out on this very cool, rainy afternoon here in the city, which it is very, very cool today. They're saying it might even hit in the low 50s tonight before going back up to the 80s this coming week. So we're going to be enjoying the nice, cool evening. And I'm going to keep on doing this until I get this worked up here. And I'll be doing, I think I'm going to be doing the Galaxy Trio tomorrow. Like I said, I want to shake things up, and I will get back to the Transformers. I will get back to the Tiger Sharks. I am working on those layouts and moving forward with that. But I decided, like I said, I just want to do something a little different and kind of shake things up a little bit and get out of this rut that I put myself in. So, with that and all the nasty press over the weekend, it's just one of those things, man. It's gotten me bummed out. I've had a few friends that have just gone off of Facebook completely because of the fact. And, with me working in social media as well, it's just one of those things. I'm trying to stay out of all that garbage because of the disrespect of what it actually meant in the first place, being turned into a political issue. I'm not going there. But, it's just a mess right now. And I don't want to get into that. But we don't go there. But I think we've got this handled where we've got Mightor. I hope you guys dig it. And I will see you tomorrow. So hang tight, hang tough, and enjoy the rest of the evening. And we'll go from there. I'll ink this one and color it up and post it after a while. That'll be a nice piece to finish out for you guys. And we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.